Right India Season 3. Uh, as a seasoned TEDx speaker and someone who has graced premier literary events like Time Beat Fest and Pune International Literary Festival, Dr. Jyoti Jha has also shared her wisdom with esteemed institutes such as ITs and IIMs. Her numerous literary awards and prestigious honorary doctorate, Vidya Vachaspati from Vikramshil Hindi Vidyapeeth, further underscore her significant contribution to both Hindi and English literature. So, without further ado, let us warmly welcome Dr. Jyoti Jha to the stage, and we eagerly anticipate the enlightening session that ahead of us. So, so I, so I would like to call Dr. Jyoti Jha on the stage. Ma'am, am I audible, ma'am?
I think she's not able to hear us. So, yeah, Jyoti, are you able to hear us? Okay, I'll tell her to join again.
Yeah. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello, am I
Hello, ma'am.
audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, but I can't hear you actually. Sorry, I don't know if there's something in my setting I need to work on, or is there something?
Mm,
So, no problem, ma'am. Are you? Can you hear us now?
Uh,
Are we audible to you, ma'am? Uh,
I'll tell her to join again, maybe.
okay, ma'am.
okay, I'm still not able to hear. I'm sorry.
Not yet.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You are audible.
Oh my God, I can still not hear you. Sorry about that. I don't know if there's something because I checked all the volume settings and everything. Okay. So do you want me to begin with the session? But I will not be able to hear from yours end, I believe.
Will write in the chat box, ma'am.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I'll tell her to begin.
I can hear these voices, the ones right now. Okay.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
Yes, audible now.
Okay.
oh, are
Okay,
you?
ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. So should I begin?
Yes, ma'am. Uh, but we would like to
Yeah, yeah, sure. No
introduce
problem.
everyone, introduce you to everyone. So,
Certainly. Yeah.
so, so, Ria, I think you should tell more about her.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Jyoti Jha's journey is truly inspiring, and as we explore her achievements, we find a winner of the Times of India, Right India Season 3. Beyond accolades, she has proven her mettle as a storyteller, captivating audiences not just nationally but internationally. Her storytelling finesse has not only graced literary events but has also illuminated the minds of students at renowned institutions like IITs and IIMs. Today, it's not just about recognizing her as an accomplished HR turned author, columnist, and storyteller, but understanding the profound impact that storytelling can have on our lives. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Jyoti Jha as we eagerly await her insights and stories. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ria, for that warm welcome and that wonderful introduction. Thank you so much.
Welcome,
So,
ma'am.
yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And before we begin, I would like to thank NIT Jalandhar, Literary and Debating Club, the wonderful team, Dr. Shefali Arora, and all you wonderful people who have joined us here today for making me a part of this short term course on creative writing and inviting me to the session. And I hope we all take something back home today after this session and we find it useful. So, shall we begin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sure. So, as we all know, art is all in the details, putting the pieces together and making sense out of them. So, literary world is vibrant with its changeable character and maneuvering quality. The success and popularity of any literary work, book, or piece of writing, or article, or any content that we generate today in any form, any channel, on any platform. On a great scale, it all depends on the editor of the book. An editor is the nicest person who, without any so called credibility, performs the tasks to make a book error free. And as I say today, in India, the role of an editor is still not that as recognized as it is recognized in some of the other countries. So, what is all the hue and cry about editing? What is editing? Editing is nothing but a mechanical task and a process of selecting and arranging textual, photographic, visual, auditory, or cinematic material for use by a person or entity to communicate a message or information. The editing process may include correction, simplification, moderation, categorization, and a variety of other changes conducted to generate a correct, consistent, accurate, and full, wholesome piece of work. So, that is the role of editing, and that is what editing is all about. So, is that all? No, there's so much more to this simple word editing. So, we just move ahead with the topic. So, to begin with, editing is a difficult process. It's not as easy as it sounds, or as you can see the explanation and all the description about it when you Google what is editing. It is a difficult and daunting task, both for the writers and for the people who edit your work. But it must be learned because it is important. It is an important aspect of writing, creating, and presenting that creation to the world in the most original and most presentable way and near perfect, because nothing is perfect, but of course to near perfection. So there are numerous facets to developing this skill. So what are those? We will learn as we go ahead in the session. So editing requires proactive editor suggestions and adjustments to improve the quality of your writing, your work, especially in terms of expressing language and sentiments, emotions as we speak. Editing needs more sophistication as compared to proofreading. We will learn about proofreading also as we move ahead in the session. Editing needs subject knowledge, an in-depth subject knowledge, not a superficial one. It whereas in the case of proofreading, it needs an eagle's eye. Okay, so I will try to share a PPT before we move ahead. And let me just figure out, because I am still in that generation who are struggling with the technicalities and everything. So let me just see if I can share the PPT. So maybe you can find it useful. Okay, just bear with me a moment. Okay, how do I share? Okay. I am just not able to figure out how to share the PPT. So I'll still try to do it somehow.
There's a share option, share content option, which will be like next to your mic or camera. So you can click on that and
Okay.
uh,
Mhm. Okay,
and
okay.
then you can share your screen and your PPT will be there on that.
Okay,
Otherwise,
share.
if yeah,
Mhm.
if you there is an issue or something, then we can Prabhuda or Ria, they can go ahead and share. You can share the PPT with me in that case. I'll
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think that would be great if I can send it to you, and if you can share it, I will
mm,
be really obliged. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, you can just send it to me. I'll
Yes, sure. I'm sending
No
it.
problem, ma'am.
Okay. Uh, should I send it over WhatsApp?
yeah, yeah, I'll share it with Prabhuda. I'm sharing it with you further.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
just bear
ma'am.
with me a moment. Yeah, sorry. Uh, just give me 2 more minutes. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I think I have just about reached there. Okay, I have shared it with Dr. Shefali, if you can check in.
Right, I've received it and now I'm sharing it further. Prabhuda, can you please go ahead and share? Ria or Prabhuda, anyone you can.
Ma'am, I'll be sharing it. You
Yeah,
can send
I
it to me.
shared it with you.
That would be great. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that.
Is it visible, ma'am?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much for that. Yes, so this is the very first introductory slide where we bring to you the purpose of this session today. So it's understanding the prism of editing for creative writing workshop at NIT Jalandhar, the literary and mm, the literary club. Yes, okay. So we can move on to the next slide. If that is okay. Yes. So I think we have about discussed what is editing. And as we can see, there is a very good quote. The first draft is black and white, and editing gives the story the color that it requires. And it is very true because the very first story, the most original form that we all write, story or a piece of writing or anything, even if we write a blog or article or anything, it is always black and white because we feel it is perfect because we have poured out our thoughts and heart and sentiments and observations and experiences on the paper or on the digital screen. But when we go through it all over again, we see there are some errors and we try to make it error free. And that is where editing plays an important role. So, what is editing? As I have explained earlier, it is nothing but a mechanical task and the process of selecting and arranging textual, photographic, visual, auditory, or cinematic material for use by a person or entity to communicate a message or information that you want to convey through your writing. The editing process may include corrections, as I said, simplification, categorization, and a variety of other changes conducted to generate a correct, consistent, accurate, and full piece of work. As I said, making your writing better day by day and with every step and process through editing and proofreading, and then presenting it to the world in the most accurate form that it is meant to be so that it reaches out to their heart instantly. So thank you, and we can move on to the next slide, please. So as I said, editing is a difficult process, but it must be learned because we cannot leave it as I we saw that it is a very important aspect of writing and bringing your work to the world. And there are various aspects to developing this skill, and we will learn those one by one through the session. And it requires proactive editor suggestions. Proactive editor suggestions, yes, because we need an expert who knows what is the subject about, We need an expert who knows what the work is about, what the market demand is, and how best it can be presented to the readers, the target audience, or to the world. So we need a person who is proactive and expert and who can guide us through this process. And we need adjustments to improve the quality of writing, as I said, through language, sentiments, and emotions. And that is the next point. We focus on the use of language and emotion. So how do we explain editing? It in as it is said already. And what happens? Why editing? We elaborate a little bit on this. After editing, what do you achieve and why you should do it? So to make it more clear, your language will be sharp and consistent, your expression clear, and the overall readability of your work and writing will be enhanced. That is why you need editing. It should ensure that your writing gives the impression that the language comes naturally to you and it is not forced on you. And even if it does not, your language will be sharp and consistent because we, in today's times and even before, we are good at multi languages, and we like to express in different languages. We have known many authors, writers, editors, or in any creative field who have expressed in different languages. So all those languages come to us, those people naturally, but there are some that we acquire, and we still want to express in a different language because every form of writing or any creative art, especially in writing or where language is required, I think it chooses its own expression through its language. Because if in my case, I would say, if I have to write a story or if I have to write an article, it is already preformed in my head whether I want to write it in English or Hindi or Marathi or any other language that I can converse with or I can learn and try to express in that. So even if you are good in a language or you are trying a new language, editing can always make your work better. So your expressions will be more clear and the readability of your writing is going to increase and improve. And editing should also guarantee that your work creates the idea of your language skills, whether you know the language or whether you are learning it. So it should ensure that the idea of your skills of language and expressing it beautifully is clear and it is enhanced through this process. So what is the process of editing? So we can move on to the next slide. That is fine. And I think we have discussed this, so we can move ahead to the next slide. Yeah. So what is the process of editing? There are different steps that I have mentioned here. The various points, these are not the steps. These are various aspects that involve in the process of editing. The first and foremost is organization. There must be a distinct introduction and conclusion. Any piece of writing, we all know that yes, we need to introduce and then we need to conclude, and there is the whole body in between. Then there is the paragraph structure. There must be distinct transitions between paragraphs. To introduce the major idea of each paragraph, a topic phrase is required. And what is topic phrase? Because every story has different phases, if I speak of a story, so there are different uh, aspects to it, different incidents that I bring together and make it a whole story. So each expression is presented in a particular paragraph. And that paragraph needs to have that topic phrase. So we have in mind that, okay, in this particular paragraph, this is what I'm about to cover. So that's how it works. And through editing, we try to make it clear so that there is no, the ideas are not mixed up, jumbled, and it is made more organized. So that is the part of editing and the role of editing. And then we look for what is the big idea, because when we write something, we have an original idea in our mind and we express it through the very first draft that we create. And when we go through that draft, we read, reread, and edit and re-edit. And then finally, whatever the outcome is, So what we do is we try to understand what is the big idea, what is the greater picture that we want to present through our writing. So that statement should be very clear and focused, and that we can achieve through editing. And it is supported by evidence, as it is mentioned here. So we present an idea and it is supported by evidence. So what do we mean by that? Again, I will set an example of a story. So if I'm narrating a story, so what is the idea? What is the story about? What is the outcome? What is the aim of the story? And how I support my story through characters, through incidents, through setting, and through background, and all those elements that any storytelling has. So those are the solid evidences that lead to the bigger picture and the idea. And we also need to make sure through editing clarity in whatever we want to present, because sometimes we go just haphazardly. We are so uh, brimming with all the ideas in our head that we don't know what we are pouring out. So once it is all out there, we need to streamline it, structure it, give it clarity, what we want to express, why we want to express, and whether that is going to reach to the target audience, the readers, or the viewers and watchers. So that is what we need to do, and that is done through editing. When necessary, providing definitions and proof can help to improve the clarity of your work and thoughts, as it is mentioned here. So, what are the points that we consider while editing? There are various points that we consider while going through this process. We look for word repetition, because many a times we are so full of expressing ourselves and our idea that we try to uh, we try to present one thing in repetitive manner, and in that case we try to use one words several times. So through editing we try to remove that, and that is important part. We need to see the sentence structure. We need to make proper use of technical terms that have been used. Technical terms when there are academic writings or where there are research papers, thesis presented, because editing is required for all kind of work, any kind of content, any kind of written work that we do. So that the technical terms, the jargons that have been used, whether they are correct, the spellings, the grammar, and everything that we have put there, we need to check that, and that is all done through editing. So we need to see that there are proper words chosen to express the sentiment or the idea that we want to present. Because many a times uh, we have certain idea, but we have maybe expressed it in a way that it changes its meaning. So we need to make sure that they are both coherent and they collaborate with each other. So what we want to express is how we have chosen the right words to do that. So the editor will pick up this job and do it for you. And also we need to see, is there excessive passive voice where there is active voice? So those are the things that we need to look for while editing. And too much of passive voice makes the storytelling or writing a little bit drab, and maybe not very clear, its motive. So we need to work on that and take care of that. So is the tone appropriate for the audience? Because depending on what kind of writing we are doing, we need to target the audience and whether it is suitable to the audience that we are presenting our work to. So the tone is very important. And have you used too many words to explain a particular, supposedly I want to uh, express a sentiment of my protagonist. So if there is one particular word that can explain it, have I used too many of flowery language or too many of words to express that sentiment? Those are unnecessary. So that we need to cut down on, and that's what editing does. So, and that is a pet hate for editors because the editors like to remove as many words as possible. Because as writers, we don't want to waste even a single comma that we have put out there, but it is the editor's job to remove as many words and the comma and full stop and everything that we have put out there to remove from the work that you have presented. So it's a tussle that goes through uh, the writers and the editors that go through that tussle process. But if they sail through, editors are your best friends and they have your best interest. So, have you used language appropriately? And when editing a piece of writing, an editor shall consider the following important questions. There are many things that the editor has in mind, and that these are the points. Have you chosen appropriate words to explain your thoughts, as I just explained? And also, the editor will notice if you appear to have used a thesaurus throughout the document. So yes, that's the exactly same thing that I said a while ago. So passive voice again, and have you overused words? And have you made the sentence too complex? Because many a times to write in the most beautiful manner, we try to make things more complicated, whereas a simplicity would explain it better. So, so that's one thing that editing takes care of, and a good editor will do that for you. So is the tone suitable, as I said? So verbs, the grammatical parts, as I said, the punctuation and everything, it all comes under editing. What is the subject matter? Do we have we used correct phrases for that? And putting it all together, the picture and idea that I said. So keeping that in mind, putting it all together and making sense of it in the most accurate way. So we substitute some words and phrases that we have used, and making your statement more specific too, because many a times we want to express something, but we are not clear and certain about how do we do it. So we try to explain it through various ways, various uses of different language, different um, expressions and different words and punctuations and too many exclamatory marks, maybe, for example. So, what the editor does is try to make it more concise and more acceptable and more presentable. So, the editors also look for the qualifiers and they determine whether they are required. Is it possible for them to be more specific, or a more general approach is required in that particular piece of writing, depending on the motive of writing and the target audience. The editors will always look for a spot where you can combine two words that mean the same thing. As I said, repetitive words, trying to explain one particular thing in different, like the synonyms, as we say. We try to use too many of them. So if we can cut down and use just one word to explain what we want to express. So that is what editor does. And finding standard phrases, for example, the fact that, or in the case that, and then replace it and use it, which is more suitable in that particular case. So we can move on to the next slide, please. So the types of editing. We have spoken about what is editing and all the elements and how it is done, what is the outcome and everything. So now we speak about there are different types of editing. So what are the different kinds of editing? Editing may appear to be a solitary task, and if you Google about it, there are so many things that you're going to find. But all that influx of information should not confuse you. Uh, you need to be able to categorize all the information and use it properly. You need to edit it in your mind and be a good editor first. So, editing is not as difficult to learn as the information that we are provided with all over in today's era. So it can be also confused with proofreading, but that we will discuss, and we will see what are the differences between editing and proofreading. And understanding the different types of editing, it goes beyond uh, assisting you in selecting the best editing or proofreading services. And why we need to understand the types of editing, because every piece of writing will require a different kind of editing. As I said, what have you written, the kind of writing, the target audience, why you have written, and depending on all these factors, there are different types of editing that may be required for your writing. So that's why we need to understand the types of editing. And these are the procedures you should take to protect yourself when writing. So editing, as we see, developmental, substantive, or content editing. So usually, generally, we say developmental editing, and which is the most important part of editing. And there is structural editing, there is copy editing, line editing, mechanical editing. Many times, copy editing and line editing are considered to be one and the same thing, but no, they are slightly different. Although have they require same skill sets, but they're slightly different. So, what do we do in the developmental stage? Developmental editing, also known as substantive or content editing, is usually the very first step of any editing process. A manuscript goes through this because here the editor looks for the bigger picture, as we mentioned earlier. So the editor will look for the bigger picture, the idea that we want to present through our writing. So it will consider uh, the structure and content of the book. So what is the idea? What is the theme? What is the structure that you have presented? And what is the content, overall content? And it requires an expert because line editing and copy editing is more mechanical, but developmental editing requires more of your brain work because you need to look at a work and then determine uh, what are the errors, the underlining errors that you can change. Like supposedly in my case, there was a story that I had written and I was very confident about it. But when I presented it to my editor, they asked me to make a change in the end of the story, and they said it is not aligning with the idea that you're trying to present. And then there was always, you have to learn to agree to disagree with your editor and also accept whatever they are offering. So I did make a change to the editing of my story, and yes, I was very happy with the outcome of it. So yes, you should align with your editors and listen to them. And that was developmental editing because he tried to tell me to make a very big change because uh, as we said, there is start and end, introduction, and then there is conclusion. So if you're changing something like that, or even the theme of your story, sometimes the editors tell you to change the entire theme, that change the entire process that you are using to present your theme. So those kind of changes come under developmental editing. And also the content's consistency, because many a times we are so overwhelmed while writing that we forget. Maybe we are using passive tone, we move on to some, supposedly we are speaking in present tense and then we move on to past tense and all those things. So those kind of things, so that there is a consistency in what in the uh, writing that we are presenting. The organization and structure, all these things come under developmental editing. And sometimes even there are some inconsistencies, as we said, in the storytelling or writing. So that all again is covered under developmental editing. And during this process, the very first step of editing, that is developmental editing, the editors don't look for the minor irregularities like the punctuation and grammar and all those things. So those things are taken care of in different types of editing that we will discuss later. And as I said, the grammar and punctuation and all those things are taken care of during copy editing and line editing. So copy and line editing are two different types of editing, as I said earlier. Copy editing focuses on making the content more readable and consistent in its wording. A line editor concentrates on single sentences and paragraphs rather than the full document. So that's the role of copy editing and line editing. They actually go line by line and through your writing and try to make the changes, which makes it more readable. There are no structural changes, just the small changes that will make your writing uh, error free in terms of language and not expression of idea. So what is mechanical editing? Mechanical editing is when your paper has been reviewed thoroughly through all these editing processes, then comes the mechanical editing. The editor here takes on the task of ensuring that spelling, grammar, punctuation, and formatting, the overall, all the tasks that have been done, is then looked over by the mechanical editing. And they read your paper carefully and ensure that capitalization, abbreviation, punctuation, all these things have consistency in them. The language, the words, the usage of word, formatting. So how the writing looks when it is presented in form of book or in any form that we use today, because there's different types of, there are ebooks, mm, there are paper books. So all those different types of books or any different types of writing material, uh, if there is an academic research paper, so it is a completely different structure, a magazine. So how it looks after formatting. So that all comes under mechanical editing. So once your writing has gone through all of the different types of editing, you'll be left with a beautiful piece of writing. And believe me, yes. And that is more logical, more presentable, more accurate, and more acceptable by the people you're trying to present it to. And as we speak of types of editing, many a times these different types, they overlap with one another. The role of every type of editing may overlap with one another, but they are still very distinctly different from one another. And we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so what do the editors look for? I think we have already discussed this, but yes, of course, there is no harm in just quickly revising. The editors look for the word choice and sentence structure and content, the fact checking to ensure that the stuff written is accurate, the accuracy that we mentioned, inconsistencies, tone and style and everything. Sections of the text that could be made shorter. Yes, that I said, because over explaining sometimes spoil the idea that you're trying to present. So shortening it also helps. So the enhancements to the content's presentation, the formatting and the kind of font that you're going to use, the font size and everything, all those things, and also the idea how you're going to present it. So all levels of editing included. And the line editors can make direct changes to the material. Yes, they can do that. And that's what they have been given the job. So we can move on to the next slide. So now we come to this interesting part, editing versus proofreading. So as we said, it can be quite confusing. And for people who are very new and they don't know, they confuse editing to proofreading. These are two different processes. And even before this, I would like to add a point. Whenever you write something, let the most original form, because let not the fear don't let the fear of editing and proofreading and all those things get into your head so much that you're afraid or you hold yourself back from expressing the most original form that comes to your head. So first and foremost, the very first draft that comes out should be the most original, authentic form and the most original idea that generates in your head. So let it pour out in whatever way it is coming out. So let it just be there out on the paper and then start worrying about the editing part. So keeping that in mind, then we move ahead with this particular slide. What is proofreading? Proofreading, yes, thank you. Proofreading is the process of correcting surface errors in writing, such as grammatical, spelling, punctuation, and other language mistakes. And it is an important service because any writing intended for publication in any form, whether an academic article, book, or business document, must communicate its message in the clearest possible way. For writing to be clear, there must be no spelling, grammar, or punctuation error. Uh, or inconsistency in language. All these points that we have already discussed, and these can undermine the impact of writing and credibility of the author. Yes, because even if there is a very good story, but if it is presented very badly, you may lose the effect and you may lose connection with the story and the idea that the writer is trying to present. So a good idea combined with a good presentation is very important, and it works wonder, and it connects immediately, instantly with the readers. So, editing and proofreading. Editing and proofreading are required while writing all this. Editing needs more sophistication than proofreading, because proofreading is just, a bird's eye view, whereas editing is more extensive, and it is more grueling. So editing refers to making more local changes, as we mentioned and we discussed a while ago. And proofreading involves looking at the text closely, line by line. Proofreading has less ambition than editing, but it still performs a vital role. Why is that so? Because proofreading will just give a quick look to your work and then give you some pointers. Okay, these things you can make changes and you can do this. You can enhance your work this way. Whereas in editing, it is a more extensive process where it takes more time and more effort. So proofreading can be done just maybe in lesser time as compared to editing. They are two different jobs, but are designed for different stages of the revision process. Yes. And editing provides an opportunity to make your writing better, while proofreading is a final check to make it even more enhanced. Yes. So first comes the editing and then comes the proofreading. So what we have seen what editors look for in your work. So now we will see some points what proofreaders look for in your work. So what they will see is, are there any spelling errors? Are there full stops, commas, or any other use correctly? And have words that sound like one another but have different meanings. Because many a times while writing, we don't realize, for example, there is always a mistake. Many people uh, confuse there. So these similar sounding words, if they have been used incorrectly, so those are the things that proofreader will take care of and point out for you. Question marks, apostrophes, all those things the proofreader will see. Are there any double spaces? As it also comes under formatting and again, there's again some overlap between the work of proofreading and editing, but they are different than one another. And so ideally, a writer would receive an editing service first and then proofreading. And we can move on to the next slide, please. Professional editor. So we have spoken about editing and proofreading and the process of editing and what the editor looks for, what we achieve through editing and why we should do that. So now we look for some traits that a professional editor must have and um, and is well aware of to become an expert and do their job wonderfully. So a professional editor understands the conventions of writing in any language and the nuances of the language, and it's trained to be methodical and professional and through experience, and can identify and eliminate the common errors that often plague a good writing. Because as I mentioned earlier, a good idea presented badly can ruin the effect and can disconnect people from the written piece. So there has to be a good combination of a good idea and good presentability. So editing is essential for whom? As I mentioned, I think already through the discussion, that it is essential for authors and writers first and foremost, but it is not confined to that only. And I think we can move on to the next slide, if I remember. Yes, who needs editing? As it is shown here, writers and authors, yes, first and foremost. Students, yes, they need editing, because you being students, you must understand that while you are writing assignments, you have to submit assignments. You must be going through whatever you have written, because your first draft is again whatever the idea that you want to present or the work that you want to show is the very first draft, but you do go through it, you make changes to it. So that is editing. So unknowingly, we are all editors and we use it, But professionally also, students supposedly they have to submit a research paper. So yes, if they get an editor, they can present their work even more beautifully. Businesses, yes, because businesses they need content creation to reach out to their audiences, their customers. So they need to put out all the content error free. So all the jargons, their intentions, the motives, the ideas, their vision, mission, and everything, if written wrongly, can can give a wrong idea to their customers. So it has to be error free. So yes, they need editing. Bloggers, yes, because uh, the blooming word of bloggers that we have today and the online content generation, yes, what we put out there is very important, because we should be responsible for what we want to express and how we want to reach out to the world in the most error free manner. Because writing anything anyway and then thinking, okay, I'm done with it and I just need to give it out to the world, no, you need to present it in the most beautiful way. So yes, bloggers, they need editing. Content creators, yes, they need editing. Academicians, yes, they need editing. And I think you all must agree with that. So I think that's all about it. And is there anything else that you would like to ask or make it more interactive, or you want me to go on with a few more points?
Ma'am, could you please just sum up the types of editing once again? I know that it's a bit, problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Could
Types
you
of edit.
please? Yes, yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes, yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So the editing as types of editing, as I mentioned, there's developmental editing. That's the very first step of editing, where the editor and an expert required for that, because line editing and copy editing can be mostly done by even newbies or freshers or less experienced people. Someone who has a good knowledge of language can do line and copy editing, but someone who is more creatively capable of assessing a work, a piece of creation, and has more experience is needed for developmental editing. So what that person does is looks at your work from a bird's eye view, looks for the theme that you're trying to present, the idea, the flow of the idea, and the the connection of all the incidents or all the pieces put together, whether that makes sense and whether it is acceptable to the world in the most accurate manner. So all those things are taken care of in the developmental editing, and that also involves all the other parts of editing, but overall it's the bigger picture. And structural editing is again making any structural changes to your writing. Supposedly, again, and putting an example of a story. Uh, as I said, I had to change the ending of my story. So that was the structural change that I had to do. So that's structural editing. And copy and line editing is going through your work line by line and making the changes in the language and expression, uh, whether it is grammar, punctuation, expression, or spelling mistakes, all those kind of errors that comes under copy editing and line editing. They are mostly overlapping, but slightly different from one another. And then there is mechanical editing. That is the editing that comes after all these editing processes have been done. So first there is the bigger picture, then there are the smaller and intricate details that you change, and then the overall uh, view that you take of that written piece, that is mechanical editing.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Ma'am, what about developmental and structural editing? Would that be done by the same editor, or would there be two different editors to deal with these two?
See, I think a developmental and structural editing can be overlapped and can be done by an experienced person, but it depends, because what kind of specification you require, your work requires. Because if you have written a story and you just reach out to one editor, many a times that editor will do everything for you. But if you reach out in a more professional manner, there is a team of editors, then there are different editors for every stage. When you reach out to the bigger, maybe the editors who have a team of editors who deal with different kinds of editing, so then they will have different editing service for every stage of editing. So it depends. So many a times one person will do everything for you, and many a times it's a team and an expert for every stage of editing.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay. Do you all, anybody who is a writer here and would like to share some input or ask something? Since we are all here at Creative Writing Workshop, I'm sure there must be some writers, readers, and we are all readers because we are studying. Even if you are studying your academic books, you are a reader. And you are writing your assignments, you are writers. Yes, because we are talking about writing of all kinds, so we are all writers. So, okay, so I'll add some
Ma'am,
more points. Yes, yes, sorry.
ma'am, are there some softwares which can help us edit our manuscripts before we submit our manuscript to a publisher?
Yes, we do take some online help because there are channels, platforms like Grammarly and, uh, similar platforms where we can, the initial error free, finding that error free document or story or whatever write up we are trying to present, we can use that tool. It is helpful because it makes our life easier, because anyway we are becoming so dependent on um, the all the advancements in the technicalities that we are becoming lazy a bit. So we try to make our job easier. So yes, we can use that. It is useful. Even I use at times. But you cannot completely depend on that. You need a human mind to look at the bigger picture, and uh, a person with creative acumen to guide you better. So yes, so you can't depend on those online channels and tools and softwares to give you a completely error free work and present it to the world. You need to have the experts, industry experts, to guide you through it. Because many a times you must be seeing, if we want to use a Google translator, so if we write something in one language, it may completely come out differently in the language we are trying to translate. So yes, we should all agree that it cannot completely replace human capabilities. So we need to have some dependency on our own minds, but they are helpful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so there are some points. So, okay. So before we begin to write, we need to understand whether we are well versed with the language we are trying to express, and in terms of how we talk and write, and do we have a command over language. And for most readers, the writing style, whether our writing style is going to appeal to the readers. So that is, keeping that in mind also helps. So these are the tips for the writers and even for the editors, because they are experts, they will already know this. But for writers, especially the first time writers, uh, the new ones, these tips can be helpful. So are there any mistakes? And as I mentioned earlier also, the very first draft that comes out should be the most original form without any inhibitions. Let it all out and then take a break from all of it. Go out, get some fresh air, take few days off, few hours, few days, maybe few weeks, few months off, and then come back to your work. Try to reassess it And that I'm talking about writing books, not when you have to submit your assignments, you can't do that. But yes, when you're writing a book, especially for your manuscript, you need to do that. Because when you come back with a fresh mind, you see in your own story that you want to make several changes, and you spot many errors that you may have missed while writing the very first draft. So work on that, do that. So as I said, read, reread, edit, re-edit. We are the very first editors of our own work, and we should not get away with that. Using online tools, as we mentioned, that also helps, but those are only minor errors that we can correct. We cannot expect those tools to help us with changing the idea and all those kind of things. So yes, but it is helpful. So the initial, especially when you're writing articles, so it is greatly helpful, all those the applications that we use, the tools that we use. So, and then once you are satisfied with your work, because it is an ongoing process, the more you look into it, the more changes you want to make every time. So at some point of time you have to let it go. And again, I'm discussing about manuscript and not about any other kind of writing. So sticking my version to manuscript, at one point of time you have to learn to let it go. Okay, this is the most perfect way I can present. Now let the experts do their job. And then you reach out to the editors and proofreaders and then let them do their job, and then come back to you with the version that may be similar to what you have written. And in many cases, as I have heard few stories where the very first draft is so different than the final outcome that the writer herself himself is so confused, oh my god, is this what I had written? So that also happens, but yes, it happens for good. So that's the story of editing, that begins with writing and then moves on to bringing your work to the world in the most beautiful way. Uh, do we have any questions or any queries?
Uh, Ma'am, may I ask you one more question?
Yes, yes, please.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, for a creative writer, writing is a very constructive and creative process.
Hmm.
He or she would pay a lot of attention to artistic aspects than technical aspects. On the
Hmm.
other hand, an editor would be involved in a surgical, mechanical exercise.
Yes.
So, do you
Yes.
think that sometimes the editing can do more harm than good? And if it is the case, how can we avoid that?
That's a very good question. And as I had mentioned, it is a forever tussle between a writer and an editor. Because as you said, creative acumen is more when you write, and editor is more into technicalities of it. But the editor, every editor is a writer somewhere, and every writer is an editor to some extent. So, keeping that in mind and overlapping both, I think we should learn to agree. And even if we have to agree to disagree, we should do that. And sometimes the editors also agree to the writers. Okay, this is what, because if you are able to justify your idea the way you have presented to the editor, and the editor is convinced, that works wonder. But if the editor is not convinced, try to understand their perspective and see and assess whether it is going to make your work more presentable. And in the way, because there are stories nowadays with self publishing, it has given you more control on your content. So that's why we have more self published authors nowadays, and also because of various other reasons. One thing that self publishing provides you with is more content over your more control over your content. But having said that, traditional publishing is a better way to go ahead with, because you have experts who know how market runs, what is acceptable, what will work in the market, and all those things. So yes, they take care of all those things, and they have teams. Editors don't do that. Editors have their work only focused on your writing and making it more enhanced and beautiful and presentable and error free. So that's the job of editors. But industry experts help you in many ways. And as you mentioned, is it more harm than making it beneficial? No, we need to draw some line over there and learn to trust and also let go at times. And if we are very confident about our own writing and our idea, then we need to be very adamant with presenting it the way we want to do it. So setting our foot down in that case, and it works because it's a tug of war, but it works. That's how it has been working, because you need to find balance between that tug of war. And there are many masterpieces that we have today. We have classics and all those stories that we refer to, we go to, we read every time, and they have all gone through those processes. So yes, it works.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So if there are any more questions or and one thing I would like to add here is editors and proofreaders, they only help you with what you already know. Because while we are writing, there are many things we overlook. So they are just trying to point that out for you. So many times you accept, many times you're forced to accept, many times you don't accept and you convince them. So it works always.
I have one question, Dr. Jyoti.
Yes.
I want to know your opinion on how AI tools are changing the entire scenario of editing, like Chat GPT and all that.
Yes, that's very interesting. And thank you, Dr. Shefali, for that, bringing it out, because it's a hot burning topic. And as much as we are threatened by AI, because the way it is helping many other industry is different than uh, how it is considered in a creative world. Because the other day, I'll give you an example. I have a startup and I'm a part of it, and I was trying to create a job description, and I was so amazed because the AI came up with the job description without me having to worry about anything. So although it had made my life very convenient in that moment, and I was surprised, but it also made me fear, because again, quoting another example, we use Google Translator. So it has made our life so convenient that it will also, somewhere make us lose the interest of learning a new language, because we will be so dependent on it that it will maybe now we are at this point of time, we want to learn a new language, we have that interest, but dependency on all these tools, too much of it is not good. And if it is used to enhance our work and let us focus on the more important stuff, it is good. But if it is going to replace all of it, it is going to be difficult. But having said that, I think AI will not completely replace human creative acumen that we have, because it may help in creating content. It may not help in creating an original story the way a writer can do it. So I think that creative ability and acumen plays a different role here, and it works differently. So we can use AI as a tool to enhance our content creation. And remember, it is like an ocean. Whatever we put there is all going to come back to us someday. So we should also be mindful and responsible of what we are trying to put out there. So that is AI. And also, having said that, there were typewriters, but then there came computers. So did our lives change? Yes, but it, that also threatened the people who were using typewriters. But today lives are easier and humans have evolved and grown around it. So I think we will have that capability to evolve beyond that. I hope that I have answered.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you. Have we ended too like too early, or And also one more point I would like to add is many a times a writer may opt for proofreader and not the editor, or opt for editor and not proofreader. It's not necessary that you have to go through all the processes all the time. But editing, yes, it helps a lot. Even self-editing, it helps.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, you have said one thing that in while we are writing, we should keep the language as simple as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but ma'am, I have read some writers,
Mm-hmm.
but they and when I try to read their what I say stanzas or what they
Mm-hmm.
have written, ma'am, they I think they have intentionally used very tough language for the people because I have read one book. It really gives me a hard time to understand even 4 to 5 lines. So
Mm-hmm.
and it is all, but on the contrary, it is also one of the famous book,
Yes.
and writer is also one of the famous writers.
Yes, yes, yes. So that's very important and good point. And I think you have answered it yourself within that question. Sorry, is there someone else speaking or should I? Okay, okay, I'll continue. So you said that the person has written a, a very complicated language, but for you it is very difficult to understand. So what happens is whatever comes naturally, try to express in that same way, because some people have learned the language. Sorry. Yeah, some people have that natural inclination towards language in using it in the most complicated way. And in earlier times, even the readers were used to that particular language and understanding it. And as we say, earlier time, in very earlier days, writing and reading was confined to the elite. And why it was so? Because the elite had a different understanding and usage and expression of language than the common people. And what has happened over the decades and time is that writing and reading has reached out to the commoners. Today, everyone is a writer, everyone is a reader. It is no more confined to a particular strata of society. So that's why to bridge that gap and to, not let that hinder readability or writability, we need to adapt to the language that the readers of today is going to understand. But having said that, a writer may choose a target audience, because when we are writing, we know this is going to be our target audience. So if you know that your audience is kind of readers who are going to appreciate a language that is more from the earlier times, more decorative, more complicated, then you can choose. But whatever way you write, it should come naturally to you and not forced. So I think that's the best way we can just create our work, whatever comes naturally to us, write in that way, and then let the readers decide whether they can understand or not. But yes, it should be compatible to the times that we live in. I think so. That's my personal opinion.
Yes, ma'am, you were correct about that because I have seen this that the new writers have used simple languages, but
Yeah.
as we see that writing gets older over like centuries or 2 centuries, so
Yes.
the things become more difficult to read.
Yes. Yes. Yes, but we should also not lose what was, because we need to have some stream of people who still try to understand what was, because we don't want to lose that as well. Of course, we can make it more comprehensible for the people of today, but the idea should remain and should be carried forward. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay.
So if there are more queries, we can take those.
Ma'am, how is the editing of a literary book different from the editing of a non-literary book?
Hmm. See, it's not very different. The process is same. It's just that in a literary work, the target audience is different, and the idea that you're trying to present, how it should be presented. Because in literary work, if you're writing, there are non-fiction even in literary work. So how do you, because the editing process is going to be same, writing process is going to be same. It's just the idea that you present and the way you write. Because if I'm writing an article, it is completely different. It has a different structure. If I'm writing a story, it has a different structure. So, but if someone is editing, they will look for that overall, what is the theme, what is the idea, whether there are any grammatical errors, whether there is any formatting that needs to be changed. So it is mostly similar because it's the same work, but also, of course, there has to, because there are different editors for different kinds of work. Because if there is a literary work, you need to have an expert who has a knowledge of literary work and can understand it from that perspective. And a person, and any non-literary, like if we talk about any business proposal, if that it is written, so we need a different type of expert for that kind of editing. So the process is different, but we need different understanding and people with different expertise and experience, I guess.
Thank you, ma'am.
So anyone all has any questions, they can ask to them.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, to conclude, I would say there is a very famous saying by a famous person. Remember, all the revision in the world will not save a bad first draft, for the architecture of the thing comes or fails to come in the first conception, and revision only affects the detail and ornament. So, what it means is, again, to simplify it, the very first draft, the very original idea that comes out should be good enough so that it can be enhanced. If you have written, if anyone has created a piece which is not at all acceptable in many ways, in many terms, so how much ever you try to enhance it, it is not going to do wonders. So the very first draft that comes out should have some substance to it so that it is made even better. So that is the meaning of it. And to conclude it, yes, editing has an important role, but the original idea stands to be more important. So that has to come from the creative acumen of the writer in whatever writing they are writing. And I hope this session has been useful for you all. And thank you for your time here today and being a part of it. And again, I would like to thank NIT Jalandhar, Literary and Debating Club, Dr. Shefali Arora, the wonderful team, and all of you here, and for taking the session forward and being there and participating and interacting, making it an interactive session. And thank you for that. It has truly been an honor and delight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am,
ma'am.
for this amazing experience. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Should I log out? Or is there any other process?
Ma'am, you
Yes?
can log.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.